Today we're going to be talking about adaptations, so I want to hear what is your favorite horror movie adapted from a novel. Bonus points if you don't choose one from Stephen King. Hello, I'm Adam Caesar. This is Project Black T-Shirt, the channel where we take a new or reissue horror movie and pair it with a piece of fiction that you may enjoy if you like that movie. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to check out tons more like it. It's been a little while since my last video, but today we have a treasure trove of Ryu Murakami goodness. We are going to be talking about the brand new film Piercing, directed by Nicolas Pesce, which just came out. It just hit VOD. It's not on Netflix or Hulu or anything yet, but by the time you watch this video, it probably might be. But Piercing, starring Christopher Abbott and Mia Wasikowska. It is based on a novel by Ryu Murakami. And then we're also going to be talking about the Arrow Video reissue of one of my favorite films of all time, not horror films, just one of my absolute favorite movies, Audition, Takashi Miike's Audition. And I love this film, and this is a brand new transfer, a lot of new special features, and we're going to talk about whether or not this disc is worth the upgrade. I mean, if you haven't seen the movie, it's definitely worth it, but whether or not this brand new Arrow Video disc is worth it. As always, we're going to have a book recommendation at the end of the show, and since we're going to keep with the Ryu Murakami theme, it's going to be a Ryu Murakami book, but I'll talk to you about which one and why I think it's very deserving of its own film adaptation. So going into Piercing, I kind of didn't know what to expect. Director Nicolas Pesce, this is his second film. I believe this is his second feature. I actually reviewed his first film. It was a couple years ago. It's called The Eyes of My Mother. It was definitely a kind of love it or hate it type of film. Black and white, this lush black and white photography. Very extreme, very brutal, quasi-psychosexual serial killer flick. I really, really liked it, and I talked about that at length in my review. I'll link to it over here or whatever. But it's that sophomore challenge. Sometimes debut films are amazing, and you're just like wondering what they're going to do next, and can it live up to it? And for his next project, Pesce decided to adapt a Ryu Murakami novel, and it is clear from watching Piercing, without even hearing him speak about it, that Pesce is a fan of Miike's Audition. And Piercing is a weirdo love letter to a lot of different things. It does not feel super Japanese, which is interesting. We're going to talk about Audition in a minute and kind of juxtapose them. But it does not feel super Japanese. In a lot of ways, it feels very European. We have Christopher Abbott playing a character who from the jump, from the pre-credit sequence, we know is psychologically disturbed. He's a new father. His wife, he's waking up in the middle of the night and cradling his baby, but he's holding an ice pick, and we think he's going to kill his own baby, and then eventually the baby speaks to him. And this isn't the spoiler, this happens within the first 2 minutes of the film. But it's clearly that this guy's a psycho. He's got something wrong with him. He checks into a hotel under the auspices. He tells his wife that he's going to a convention or a conference. And he calls up and he gets an escort. And he's planned everything down to the millimeter. He's got this whole plan about how this escort's going to come up to his room. He's going to make small talk with her. He's planned out the small talk even to the letter. And then he's going to murder her. And we see this whole little rehearsal scene where he pantomimes killing her, and there's actually even Pesce lays over sound effects and stuff like that. And it's actually, that's my favorite sequence in the film. It's set to The Girl from Ipanema. It's a really weird, really excellent, really darkly comic sequence. And then the escort gets there, played by Mia Wasikowska, of STOKER fame and of lots of other films fame, but from the first second, he tries out his kind of script on her, his preordained lines. Nothing goes right, and nothing goes according to plan, and it goes so far off plan that there is this kind of cat and mouse role reversal that happens that we kind of do see coming, but maybe not to the extent that the film explores this kind of almost sadomasochistic give and take, power dynamic, weirdo, bizarro world view of codependency and relationships. It's It is a movie that I will say for the first half, I think it's fantastic. Maybe my favorite movie I've seen this year. It does lose a little bit of steam in the back end for me, and it's almost because it starts playing with themes and it starts playing with images that I don't know if it was because I just watched the Arrow video version of Audition that feel like they are kind of whole cloth from Miike's vision of another Ryu Murakami novel, or if this is just, and we'll talk about this later, but if this is just Murakami's thing. He directed a film called Tokyo Decadence, which is an adaptation of his novel Topaz, which also deals with the Japanese kind of S&M scene. The movie, for me, did lose a little bit of steam, but that would be getting into spoiler territories to talk about it. It does have one hell of a final 5 minutes. It's a weirdo movie. It is a bizarre movie. It is very restrained. There are 3 actors. There are more actors that appear, but they're really incidental. There's basically the killer, his wife, and the escort. And for the bulk of the movie, it's just those 2 characters, those 2 actors on screen. It feels almost like with maybe 2 set changes, it feels like it very much could have been adapted as a stage play. Pesce very smartly, I think, intersperses these miniatures shots. And I had to wait till the end credits to be like, was that digital? Were those miniatures? But they are physical miniatures with some slight CGI augmentation to them. But there's this weird, almost dollhouse type. The sets are very mannered. Everything is very stylized. All this retro chic stuff. Add to that most of the exteriors are these models and model work. The almost Wes Anderson-ness of the movie, the very stylized nature of it, is very different from the kind of black and white, almost pastoral naturalism of The Eyes of My Mother, which is awesome. And it's showing a lot of range for this director. It's showing a lot of control. He's got 2 kind of fantastic actors really bolstering up the material. I really, really like Abbott's portrayal of a psychopath in here, because it's very much it's not like your American Psycho, Patrick Bateman in the film, where you know that bros are gonna kind of get off to oh, what a cool serial killer this is. Abbott is he plays it as such a dope. This guy's like a moron, and then it's funny how much fun the movie has with that, while still not completely playing him like a joke, while still not completely discounting his kind of emotional complexity and weirdo origin story that we kind of get in bits and pieces, kind of like we get in Audition. But at 82 minutes, it is a breeze. It is a movie that moves. It is a movie that is at points laugh out loud funny, and it points at the very kind of the turn of the movie when you realize that there is going to be a horror element to it, or realize there is going to be a body horror element to it. There's one of the just grossest and most shocking little bits of it's not even that it's that heinous bodily harm, but just the way that it's shot and the way that the sound effects work, just super duper gross. So this isn't him in full on Eyes of My Mother mode. There's real interpersonal trauma that happens in this film, and I really enjoy it. One of the best ways you can adapt something that's seemingly pretty culturally alien. Pesce, an American or Canadian, I don't really know his background, but I'm guessing American filmmaker, making a movie out of a very Japanese novel, and he finds a very interesting way to do that. I mentioned The Girl from Ipanema before, but the soundtrack is almost entirely composed of needle drops and pieces of score from Italian films. There's Bruno Nicolai and Goblin, very recognizable to horror fans. Music and musical cues show up in this movie, and it's almost dislocating. It almost you're wait a second, are we meant to realize what movie this is from? That this is from Deep Red, and I think kind of yes, and kind of no. It adds to that kind of toy box dollhouse, very artificial look that the film has, and we have a lot of scenes of characters putting on records and characters picking up phones and like old archaic technology with a kind of modern spin to it. It's a movie that's doing a lot of things and taking big swings, and I really enjoyed it. And I think for the $6 that it costs to rent, I can't see anyone forming an insurrection in the comments if I give this my full endorsement. So check out Piercing. It's a really wicked little movie. I can't wait to see what this guy does next. And I think he's doing... It's been announced, but I hope the movie's still coming out. But he's doing like a reboot of The Grudge, the Ju-on films. He's going to do another readaptation of that series of films, and it'll be nice to see him go from things that are not two movies that are not supernatural to something inherently supernatural. I would love to watch that kind of him do three very different things, bang, 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 right in a row. I'm looking forward to it. Next, we are going to talk about, and it's really true that like a movie that you have no problems with is harder to talk about than a movie that you like, but you could find things to discuss. Takashi Miike's Audition, just one of my absolute favorite films. It's a movie made in 1999, so this is basically its 20th anniversary. Doesn't feel like it's aged today. Very simply, for those of you who haven't seen it, it is about a widower. 7 years after his wife has died, he has a son. They're kind of living together, and they have a dog, and the son is kind of like, Dad, you're kind of a sad sack. You got to get back out there. And the dad's friend is a movie producer, and he comes up with this harebrained scheme that like we'll stage a fake audition, like a fake film audition, and you can use it like speed dating, and you can kind of meet a lot of girls at once, and you can see if you like any of them. So with that setup, which the film does not shy away from melodrama, the film does not shy away from its kind of romance novel, almost like roots or setup or conceit. With that setup, we have one of the most grueling and terrifying and psychologically incisive films of the last 20 years. And it's unbelievable. And from the cover, this is his girl there, played by Ii Hishina, and you know that something is going to go horribly wrong. But every time I kind of go a couple of years between seeing this movie, and I'm kind of like, oh, I think I know the movie in my mind, I think of it as split between two halves, where you have the kind of romantic comedy half, where it's very, very kind of naturalistic lighting, almost like documentary-like cinematography, and then you move to the more impressionistic half when it moves into its horror movie. But that's not quite true. And the way the movie juggles its structure, and the way that the reveal is made, that the younger woman he's dating is a psychopath, or is she, or is it all in his mind, or is this backstory, is this something he's placed onto her to make up like a damaged woman narrative? And like the structure of that and how it's revealed is so much more complex than simple, like you cut it down the middle and one half is this and one half is that. And it's a movie that I'm completely in awe of, and I'm not really gonna talk that much more about the plot of the movie itself, because I really love it and you should check it out. And this movie's and this video is probably gonna be long anyway. But what I will talk about is the Arrow Video release of this. Now, there was a Shout Factory, I think pre-Scream Factory release of Audition. It was like this 2-discer. I have it somewhere. I have it in my double dip pile now because I have this new version. But I don't think there was anything inherently wrong with the transfer of that. But it's clear that a number of years have gone by, and Arrow is kind of a master of these remasters and making these movies look the best that they can. This is a movie that is very Japanese, and Miike talks about in the new 30-minute interview they have with him in here, not only about how the film came about and the casting process and how he goes about casting people, which is very interesting and well worth a watch, but he talks about how this is a film that he didn't imagine would play much outside of Japan, and a lot of the special features kind of speak to that. There's another little like almost 40-minute interview with a gentleman I'm forgetting the name of, Tony Rand's, where Tony Rand's talks about how prolific Miike was and how he started in these straight-to-video pictures and then moved to film. But it's a movie that feels to me very much like it's a very pretty movie, but it doesn't feel like a cinematography is not lush late 90s Western cinematography. It has this kind of flat element to it, a lot of film grain, and I think this transfer does the movie a lot more justice than the last one does. And I'm working off of memory here. I didn't throw the last disc in to check, but this movie looks incredible. The special features, which I've mentioned, which are copious. A lot of them are, a lot of the interview portions, especially with the talent, with the actors, is ported over, but there is a new discussion with Miike, which is like 30 minutes long. Dude's a slow talker. Dude's kind of recitant. So it's like 15 minutes of new material, kind of in 30 minutes of him talking. But I could watch this dude talk for hours. And it's a good interview. It's very frank. He doesn't seem upset at the film's success in especially the West, but he discusses like, I've made 80 movies. And they're and by and large they're all very different. You know, I've made maybe a handful of movies that kind of fit into this subgenre, and I don't like being typecast. And he talks about the idea of like kind of pushing against typecasting and making the kinds of films he wants to make and making them the ways he wants to make. So he's clearly very much a working artist, kind of pushing forward, but talking about a film that he has a lot of respect for and kind of acknowledges in many markets and in many places kind of made him a household name, or at least in my household. Very weird needle-based household. But this is a fantastic movie. I won't say any more about it. I would 110% recommend you buy the Arrow video. If you've seen it a number of years ago, or if you haven't ever seen it, this is, I'll put the links down in the description, but this is 110% a movie that should be in your catalog. It's a movie that I love. Like I said, it doesn't shy away from the melodrama. It's got these kind of almost corny pieces. It's got these musical cues that are almost odd, but it's so expertly put together. It's a simple story told in a very, very complex and dense manner. And that's the kind of movie that I really like, a movie you can really dig your teeth into and just talk about a million different things about. And that's Audition. That's Miike's Audition right there. Those are the two movies, and for this week's book recommendation, I want to talk about a book that I have talked about before. I talked about it in one of my more popular videos, so if you're coming to the channel from that, you've probably heard me talk about it before, but it is Ryu Murakami's In the Miso Soup. Now, Penguin did a really nice translation of this. They did a really nice re-release of this a few years ago. It's a great book. It's about this dude in Tokyo. He makes his living by giving tours of Tokyo's red light district. He gets this one guy one night he's bringing him around, and he starts to realize this dude's like clearly like a psycho killer. This dude's psycho. And it's like the film Collateral with Tom Cruise and Jamie Foxx, the Michael Mann movie, meets Audition, meets Murakami. It is a hell of a book. I can't believe it hasn't been adapted yet, and I would just love to see what someone like Miike, especially if he's revisiting the same author 20 years later, what he would do with the material. One more bonus book recommendation. Since the last time I've made a video, Tribesmen, kind of my best-selling book, kind of my first book, my first novella, the book that kind of put me out there in the horror fiction scene, is this brand new edition, this brand new cover by Matthew Revere. And I know many of you watching this who have picked up some of my books before. If you've picked up any book, you've probably picked up Tribesmen. But if you haven't, there is an audiobook, there is an ebook, there is this beautiful paperback. I highly, highly recommend you start there. I feel like, 7 years later, I feel like Miike, because it's like I don't want to be typecast, but I still think that this is some of my strongest writing, one of my best books. And I'm very, very happy that it has this new edition available on Amazon right now. I'll put the links in the description. I'm Adam Caesar. This has been Project Black T-Shirt. If you want to find out more about me or my books, you can click the link below, go to my website, sign up for my mailing list. I'll send you a free short story, a free novel sample, and you can check that out. If you want to subscribe to this channel, if you want to hit like, if you want to do Facebook, Twitter, all that stuff, all the links are down below. I'm not going to belabor the point anymore. It's been great talking to you guys. 2 movies and a book, and I'm back in business, and I'll see you next week.